Hi, I'm Lauren Hubele, and I'm back here today with my intern, Megan Ethridge. And Megan and I are going to share with you 20 extracts that we suggest you have on hand as we're entering this cold, flu, and virus season. Megan, first of all, I just want to welcome you and thank you so much for taking time out of seeing all your clients and caring for your family to do this podcast.
Absolutely, Lauren. It was kind of before you asked, stirring in my spirit to jump back into things before this season and bring this back to the table to make sure everyone is prepared for cold and flu season in the middle of a pandemic year.
Yeah. And Megan, I don't know about you, but I've certainly been called to do things differently ever since March, right? And that call keeps coming. And I make some changes and then I settle and I make some changes again and it's calling again. And I'm sure this is happening collectively to people in our community and in our countries. And folks, I think this is one of the calls. One of the calls is perhaps you could do things differently with your health. And as we move into the season of colds and flus and viruses, and the weather's cold and we're inside, what a perfect opportunity to restore your body in a very natural way, which is just exactly what gemmotherapy does. And I believe everybody has the opportunity to raise their immunity. Everyone has the ability to manage these acute situations that we find ourselves in. And sometimes people are going to need further support because they have complex, long-standing chronic issues. But we all need to give our body the opportunity to do what it's designed to do. Megan, do you have any thoughts on that?
I love how you just said that you feel like we're all called to do something a little bit differently. And what's the best place to start? And that's health. And one of the things that I love about gemmotherapy is we're not just talking about symptoms, colds, or stomach bugs, or whatever it may be. We're also talking about how you feel emotionally and what your mentality is like, and looking at you holistically and having medicine and extracts to support whatever that symptom may be.
Thank you for bringing up the emotional self. Megan, I mean, if anything we've learned over these months is that our emotional immunity leads. And if our emotions supported by our autonomic nervous system are harmonized, our immunity is so much stronger. And when we are in a constant fight or flight or a dorsal vagal shutdown, for those of you following our polyvagal podcast, we have no access to our own resources. So if that's you and you're listening, I'm going to direct you over to 20 episodes of polyvagal explorations. But today, what we're going to do is share with you how we'd stock up our own family medicine chest if we were filling it, because we wanted to be prepared for every possible situation coming up through the winter, what we would have on hand. So Megan, why don't you get us started?
Okay, great. So the first line of defense, and this is for anything that is just coming up. You know, that time where you just feel, oh, I think I'm coming down with something, or something's quite off and you can't put your finger on it. Maybe there aren't any other symptoms except you just don't feel well. And those two Gemmo extracts are black currant and oak. And the interesting thing is they're both adrenal support gemmos. What I've learned from Lauren is that our adrenals are the directors of our immune systems. These are the organs that supply, you think, cortisol and resolving inflammation and directing other areas of hormones and telling, go and do this job and call up these troops. And so when we give those adrenal support initially, not only do we perhaps shorten the duration of the illness, but sometimes, y'all, we can stop it dead in its tracks.
Absolutely. And if you only had 2 extracts out of all the 20 that we were going to share with you, those would be the 2 to have on hand. Um, so once symptoms start showing themselves and we know where they are, they're in the sinus cavity, or they're in the throat, or they're in the chest, or bronchi and lungs, or in the digestive tract, then we start thinking about how do we move them. And we use our lymphatic and circulatory system to move this inflammation. We have such a great system in our body that when there's a pathogen, inflammation sent that in that direction. But we don't want it hanging out any longer than it needs to. We need that pathogen neutralized and eliminated. So how do we eliminate it? We move it out through lymph and circulation. So what are the top extracts for that? Common alder, hands down, most popular, most often used fluid harmonizer. Common alder has the additional action of preventing scar tissue from forming, which is really amazing. But then we get into some really interesting extracts that work when inflammation sets in on a deeper level and we can't quite move it. And those would be things like sweet chestnut, which is a tonic for the lymphatic system. And it's out of the 3 of these, the most gentle acting. So I would use that for children and elderly when we have things stuck in the bronchi and lungs. This is something that a lot of folks struggled with that had COVID symptoms. So that's a good one to have on hand, using the lymphatic system to move inflammation. But then we have 2 others that I think everyone should consider. Horse chestnut, and this uses the vascular system by thinning blood and helping move inflammation this way through the lungs and lower torso of the body, including the abdomen. Now, just a precaution on horse chestnut, if you're on blood thinners, this would not be a good extract for you. However, for those that just have aren't on blood thinners, it's certainly one to consider. And then a third one is a harmonizer for the arteries, again, particularly in the lower body. So we're talking about extracts that are going to help move things from the lungs. Black poplar improves the fluidity of blood and harmonizes moisture in the body. What about mucosal membranes, Megan? Do we have some extracts there?
Yes. And for all you moms with little ones, especially kids who are in school, then you know that a snotty nose and all that congestion just can come on quick and can stay around for a long time. So the first extract that we like to use for mucosal membranes is dog rose. It is a great sinus extract. So we're talking about nose, we're talking about the just sinus area, headaches. It's a great extract to use if you are getting sinus headaches. Also, hornbeam. We just love hornbeam around here. It also has some sinus influence, but it's a great extract also for the bronchi and the lungs. So when you get those kids who, the second they're going to start with a cold, it always drops down, then hornbeam is going to be something you want to think about. Black honeysuckle. Black honeysuckle has an affinity for the throat. So if you wake up with a sore throat, black honeysuckle is going to be your Gemmo. It also helps to thin mucus. It has some lung support in it. And so even if the mucus is down into the lungs, and it's going to help thin it out so the body can move it out. And that helps to improve that fluidity and get things moving and that inflammation out. Hazel is another lung Gemmo, and this improves the elasticity of the lung tissue. So if you ever have you feel like it's kind of hard to breathe because things aren't expanding as much as they need to, you would think of the Gemmo hazel. Lithy is another one that we just love in this household. Lithy, I just always think of dilation. And so it opens up those bronchi and allows more airflow to come in and out. So think of shortness of breath. Think of people who may come into those attacks of having difficulty breathing. Lithy is the Gemmo for that situation. And then walnut. So speaking of different mucous membranes, we're talking here about our digestive tract. We're talking about our urinary tract. We're talking about our vaginal lining. Anything that may have inflammation in those areas, walnut is the Gemmo that you're going to want to consider.
Great, Megan. Megan, I want to mention something here. Is if you're listening for the first time, which that's welcome, we have a lot to share for you. You're going to be building protocols when we have cold, flu, and viruses that we're working with. And so we've shared these in groups, and you're going to pick one from the group. So we've got our blackcurrant and oak, and so we're going to use one throughout the whole acute illness. Then we're going to use one to move inflammation and one for the specific areas that's inflamed with the mucosal membrane. And an acute illness changes. And Megan and I have a great podcast on the changing symptoms of viruses that you might want to listen to, but you will follow what your body's telling you. Where is it today? Where does the inflammation getting stuck? Where do I need to move? So Megan, I think what I'm leading up to too is we have another system that's very important in aiding with communication between all these areas that we're trying to work with. And that's our nervous system. Would you like to share those extracts?
Yes. And I would just love to say the nervous system, like Lauren said, it's the communication highway for the body. And so just like when you're driving on the highway, if there's an accident or they're working on the road, then you're not going to be able to get through as quickly. And that can cause a lot of problems in our body if there is a blockage or a slowdown of information coming into or being sent back to the brain. So you always want to think about a nervous system, Gemmo, to support that to support the nervous system in an acute state, making sure those communications and that information is getting to that body, that organ. Silver lime is probably a very common Gemmo that we as gemmotherapists think about when we talk about the nervous system. Silver lime helps to reconnect and maintain connection as a whole throughout our central nervous system, throughout our autonomic nervous system. It just I just love silver lime. It is not so specific, it's more general. So really, no matter what state, you really can't go wrong in choosing silver lime. I do just want to make a little disclaimer. If someone has gut dysfunction or what we call dysbiosis, then silver lime may be too strong for them, and you may find that it causes an aggravation. And typically it will just cause them to be aggravated. So if you're new to this and you give a dose of silver lime and see some aggravation, then you're going to know that something's off in the gut. Another nervous system Gemmo would be common fig. Common fig is just the digester of all things. It helps us to resolve feelings of overwhelm, any mental confusion, or things that are just too much to process. So anything from the outside world coming in, it helps us to digest what our body is taking in, while also physically digest from a stomach sense. Just a little note, silver lime and common fig, if you have those aggravations with silver lime, pairing it with fig will help to decrease the likelihood of that aggravation occurring.
Great idea.
Another nervous system, Gemmo, is Hawthorne. And when you hear the word Hawthorne, you're always going to think of the heart because Hawthorne has a huge heart affinity. So if you have palpitations, let's say when you get nervous or you're just in a very stressful situation, Hawthorne is the Gemmo for that. Dog rose, while we just spoke about it as an inflammation in the mucous membranes for the sinus area, dog rose also has nervous system properties in microdoses. And by microdosing, I'm just talking about a drop or two of these nervous system extracts. Dog rose, is great for when there's a fearful state. Maybe there's a fear of not recovering. When you think of a lot of hysteria or a lot of just very quick changes in emotional state, so going from very happy to very angry or sad, then dog rose would be a Gemmo you would think of. White willow. We just went through a hurricane in our area. And so y'all, white willow, silver lime, and common fig, just one drop of each. I can't tell you just how calming and centering this trio was. White willow is great for overwhelm and anxiety. And then I love how Lauren explained in an earlier podcast, if you think of the white willow tree and how it kind of drapes over, it just kind of places that shield around you and helping to contain and ease that feeling of overwhelm. A couple more nervous system gemmos, but they have an emotional component to them. They help to improve, especially mental clarity, would be silver birch seeds. And silver birch seed is a tonic on the central nervous system. And it's actually a gemmo I like to start a lot of people off with, because you think if you get the brain nourished and you get the brain up and functioning and able to 100% send communication anywhere in the body, then that is going to show a lot of improvement in other symptoms that you may be experiencing. It helps greatly with mental stress. It helps to increase focus, and it also helps with memory. It is a strong protector of dopamine, and dopamine it's the happy. I can't think of, is it a hormone? No.
Neurotransmitter.
That's what it is, a neurotransmitter. And it's just associated with happiness. So you always want to protect dopamine and increase dopamine when possible, just to increase the outlook of your mood and your emotions. It, again, is just a very effective brain tonic. And when I think of tonics, I think of working out. So you are strengthening that organ with these Gemmo extracts. Sea buckthorn is going to be another one that really has a great emotional component. It helps to restore our senses. It helps to improve our mood and our outlook. It just brings a lot of clarity and a lot of calmness. And then oak. We think of oak when we have depressive symptoms with just exhaustion. There's just an overwhelming exhaustion that you feel, even though you may have slept well the night before, even though you may have really haven't done a whole lot. It may have been a couch day, but there's just this overwhelming exhaustion. Oak is the extract for that. And just to recap for those nervous system gemmos, we are just dosing a drop or two. And I know if you're new to gemmos, that's going to kind of be like, what is this drop going to do anything? But trust us that it works, and it does. So Lauren, do you want to talk a little, do you have anything to share about the nervous system?
Well, Megan, I think it might be important to say this is there's a few of those like dog rose and oak, which you heard about earlier on when we were going through our list. So you will have to choose. You can either use those in full doses, like 6 or 9 or 12 drops for the body, for that part of the body, mucosal membranes or adrenal glands, or you'll be using them in a microdose to support the nervous system. And that microdose would be just 1 drop. And so that would be your choice in a protocol to do that. Megan, I think the other thing that I want to mention, those first extracts, silver lime, common fig, hawthorn, dog rose, white willow, these are great at the start of an acute illness. The others, sea buckthorn, silver birch seed, and oak might be best once we're looking for mental support and I need to get better, right? Like my head's not getting better, my thoughts aren't clear. I can feel that I'm healing, but I still need to move this brain fog from the flu or the cold. So those are better a little later on in that. So I think what I'll do, Megan, is I'm going to move into convalescence, unless there's anything that we didn't cover clear enough through this first part.
No, I think that we've covered it clearly, but you saying that made me think of something, in that the way that we measure sickness is unlike most people who measure sickness. And the way that we measure sickness, and it's also the exact way that we measure if someone's getting well, are 3 ways. And that's our mental state and what it is compared to our baseline. That's our energy level, and that is our appetite. And if we start to see, or we are seeing a decline in any of those areas, then those are early signs that our body is telling us that it's starting to fight something or that it's not well.
Yeah, Megan, thank you. That's so important. And the reverse, as you said, is true. When we start improving, we see an uptick in energy, appetite, and mood. We just went through a little virus that sailed in here quickly, and my husband was down for about 24 hours. And the first thing that happened was he didn't want to talk to anyone. He wanted to isolate himself, and he really didn't want dinner that night. Yes, we knew something was up, right? And
Absolutely.
so we started a little Gemmo protocol. The next morning, he was already feeling better. And what I see, and I'm sure you do too, Megan, is that, oh, that emotional state improving, that, oh, I am going to get better, right? So
Yes.
what I want to caution folks, and that's a good segue right into this next segment, people like my husband and maybe yours or yourself tend to think, oh, now I can get back to work full time, working just as hard as ever, and I don't need these Gemmos anymore. And this is actually a very dangerous time. Dangerous, not like, oh my gosh, something terrible is going to happen, but it's precarious for your body because you're getting signals that you're improving, but you might not be listening to your energy levels that are saying, hey, still take it easy. So, this is what I call the convalescence period. And we can reduce what we're taking Gemmo wise, but what we need to do is say, thank you, immune system. Thank you, adrenals. Here's a little support for getting me through and getting you ready for the next acute illness I might come across. And so, those extracts we might want to consider taking, depending on the length of our acute illness, we might want to consider taking them for a week or sometimes a month if it's been a long bout with bronchitis, or particularly if it's been COVID, because you'll be taking some convalescent Gemmos much longer, which we're going to be talking about on a separate podcast. So for convalescence, I like to see sea buckthorn, and I like to see that in a protocol. And sea buckthorn could be still in a microdose, 1 or 2 drops. For folks over 30, I like to see them taking common birch. Common birch is a general drainer, and it works to restore respiratory health and build immunity. So that would be part of your protocol, and perhaps with black currant to help with overall tonifying of your adrenal glands. If you're under 30, I would look to silver birch. Very similar action, general drainer, restores respiratory health and builds immunity. But this is for younger folks, children as young as 6 years old. We would use silver birch buds. And then blackthorn. Now, it would be an either or, folks. You would either do common birch or silver birch, depending on age, or blackthorn. You don't need all three. Blackthorn would be if there were medications that had to be administered and they need to be cleared, or if exhaustion remains, or if there are multiple organs affected. And once again, I would bring up blackthorn in association with something like COVID or a deep-seated virus such as Epstein-Barr. Megan, any thoughts on convalescent you might have?
Um, to just kind of spin it another way, it's not talking about the previous categories that we addressed. Gemmotherapy does three things. It brings nutrients, excuse me, directly to those cells or organs that it has an affinity for. It stimulates lymphatic flow, and it also has meristem cells, and so strengthens that tissue or that organ to make it stronger overall. So just because, like Lauren said, symptoms stop or you're on the up and up, doesn't mean that that area still isn't inflamed, isn't tired from what it's just gone through, and that it's still going to need that support for the next couple of days. And then that convalescence, like Lauren was explaining, it may be a week, it may be a month, just depending on how deep that infection or virus was and has stayed and how much it knocked you down.
Yeah, yeah. And Megan, how much it knocks you down has everything to do with the state of your body when you got it, which takes us right back to the very beginning. Folks, it's time to do something different. And there's no better year than this one. We're all home a lot more than we would want to be. And that's great because it's a great time to take care of yourself and put more focus on what you're eating, how you're getting out and exercising, and again, bringing these Gemmos into your routine. Now, we've gone through these very quickly. I want to tell you, if you want to know more about each one specifically, we have a whole podcast program called Gemmo Memos. It's in this Restoring Immunity framework. So if you subscribe to Restoring Immunity, you'll be able to find them. And you will be able to look up each extract and listen to 15 or 20 minutes to learn even more about each one. Megan, thank you for doing this with me. I'm so grateful. And I look forward to future opportunities of sharing Gemmo goodness with everyone.
Great. I was excited too. Thank you, Lauren, for having me.
So perhaps you've been listening and wondering how you can work with a practitioner with gemmotherapy or homeopathy for your COVID symptoms, or are concerned about the future exposure to COVID. I would ask you to head on over to my website, laurenhubile.com. In the middle of my landing page, you'll see a button, consult with an expert. That will take you to a link that where you can find all of my interns and Gemmo pioneers who have worked with me for many years in bringing the system of restoring immunity forward with gemmotherapy. If you can't find that button at the bottom of the footer on the web page, you'll find a Find a Practitioner link. And I wish you all the best with your health and supporting your emotional and physical immunity as we move into these winter months ahead.